Team Lima.
Alex.
Alex, all right.
Matt.
Alex, Aaron.
Nice to meet you. Alex.
Jordan.
Matt.
Aaron.
Nice to meet you. Matt.
Jordan.
Nice to meet you.
Jordan.
Aaron.
Nice to meet you. All right, Team Lima, you will have 20 minutes to present your solution to the judges. You will be given a warning when 5 and 2 minutes remain. After 20 minutes, the presentation will be stopped immediately and no information will be considered after the time has lapsed. Following your presentation, there will be a 10-minute question and answer. You will be given a warning when 2 minutes remain. The question and answer will be stopped after 10 minutes. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Hi, how's it going today? We're Team Lima. I'm Matt.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Andrea.
And I'm Alex.
So when we were looking at the problems that were set forth by NEDIC, we broke down into 2 specific recommendations as was outlined by NEDIC's instructions. So first recommendation is going to center around just the product differentiation strategy for foresight, and then the second recommendation is going to center around the international cybersecurity laws and making sure that we're in adherence with those over the course of time. So before jumping right into the recommendations, we're just going to have a little bit of background. I'm going to throw it over to Alex to talk a little bit about foresight.
So, as I'm sure you guys already know, Foresight is a data service system that can predict when devices will, or manufactured equipment will fail. So, it consists of the sensor unit that connects directly to the device and measures heat and vibration, the communication gateway that transmits that information to the cloud-based IoT platform that allows a customer to view the data, create the reports, and use an analysis to predict when a machine will fail and view the performance of a part in the machine.
So quickly, we have a video just kind of detailing the unique strategic position which NEDIC is in. So we'll just play it quickly and then talk about it for a little bit. So as is clear, for NEDIC, the institution of a cloud-based IoT platform, and specifically Foresight, is an immense strategic advantage. And as we were looking at some of the problems and challenges that were set forth, we definitely empathize with the managers and owners at NEDIC because we realize what a cutting-edge technology this is and the strategic positioning which it places us in the market. But obviously, whenever there is a very large innovation, especially in technology, many of the constituents and stakeholders and customers are going to be a little bit apprehensive about it because it does create change. So over the course of our recommendation, we're going to talk about how we're going to mitigate that change and align the core customer value of NEDIC to the end consumer with the core customer values of our constituents such as MROs and OEMs who we're selling to in the marketplace. So the first part of our recommendation is going to detail just exactly that. How are we going to differentiate Foresight?
So as he mentioned, we have 3 facets for a recommendation. Facet 1 will be outreach to our current service clients. These are the clients that we are already servicing and providing customer service when the machinery fails. Second is the outreach and connection with the OEMs. This is of core value because these are our business-to-business clients that we really want to push this device into. And third is to outreach to the MROs, which are the third group of people that we really want to focus on. So, as we mentioned, in the first facet, it focused on NEDIC and inside who our customers are. So our objective is to have our customers that are using our machinery implement foresights to just make their system better. As how we're going to achieve this is by marketing campaign that really explains this benefit to foresights can have through our already existing platforms. Like our technicians that go into the field, they can speak about foresights, just explain the benefits that this really has, and like since they're already in contact with our clients, we think that it's a perfect entry position for us. And then as a result, I think it will lower our service costs, minimize the downside that we have in servicing each machinery every time we go out into the field. We can just have it in there and we can know when we want to service it, be there at the right place at the right time. And this will just maximize the efficiency and reduce the risk of unplanned failure, which is of like core importance for this predictive maintenance that we are implementing through Foresight.
So that first facet certainly centers around the existing service centers which we have in the field and the direct NIDIC to end consumer relationship. But then we have two more important relationships that we want to look at. The first of those is OEMs, so original equipment manufacturers. And when we're looking at the value delivery chain with OEMs, it starts with NIDIC, who has these parts and these motors. And then they're selling these motors directly to the OEMs who use these components in their products. And then the OEMs sell these finished products to consumers, and oftentimes it's the OEM who's servicing those products. So this value delivery chain is what we call kind of a push marketing strategy. So as you can see, NIDIC is going to be marketing the components and the motors directly to OEMs to say, hey, this is of high quality, this is of high value. OEMs are going to adopt them, and then OEMs are going to be the ones marketing that finished good to the customer. So at the end of the day, the end customer is not going to necessarily often know what NIDIC is. That's why it's a push marketing strategy, because demand is pushed through the value delivery network. But when looking at this value delivery network, we need to ensure that we know what OEMs truly value before we determine how we can differentiate Foresight for them. And what they truly value is a high quality product which can be used in their finished goods and instituted to create customer delight to the end consumer.
So as Matt mentioned, the objective for reaching out to OEMs is to have them integrate Foresight into their already existing service platforms. And so we're going to do that by conveying the benefits that through the data that we receive from our own service platforms, and like, this is how much we can reduce costs for end consumers. And as they come to us and buy our product, we're going to buy our motors already for their own machinery. We're going to kind of put this like as an add-on, like, hey, you can also do this. And what this is going to result in is higher revenue for us, as we're going to be able to sell these systems, and it's going to be more reliable and cost-effective service for their end client and themselves. And finally, it's going to build a brand recognition for NIDIC among the end consumer. Now that you have this NIDIC platform that you can see and say, hey, that is a NIDIC product that's not just in something else that somebody else made.
So this is core to our business model, it's like the business-to-business connections with the OEM. And we want to like really build these relationships that we already have, because we really have relationships with big clients that already use our machines and our motors. And we want to like use these relationships to like connect with them. And we will achieve this by promoting and creating like videos of Foresights, informing our clients about what it is, so like they have a better understanding of the product. And we can just put this in our website, which our clients already enter, as well as just meeting with them and just, again, fostering this relationship with the OEMs that already buy our machinery, and like, so that they can build trust and have that motivation to actually pass this value down to their clients. Because what they care about is their client, and we care about their client as well, but we care about them, and we just want to really foment this value.
So the third facet of our recommendation will center around our relationships with MROs. So those are maintenance, repairs, and overhauls. So MROs are also in a push marketing strategy. It starts with NIDIC, who sells the replacement parts. MROs demand the replacement parts and purchase them. Then the MROs perform this service for the end customer who might have had this malfunction with their equipment. And then the end customer pays the MROs. It's a little bit different than the OEM strategy. So NIDIC kind of is marketing the product to the MROs and just saying this is a very high quality product that you can use in a machine when you replace it. But then the end customer is not necessarily buying NIDIC's product, but they're buying the MRO's services. And again, this is a push marketing strategy because it kind of, marketing is pushed down through the value delivery network. However, we believe that this push marketing strategy can be inverted in a way into a pull marketing strategy, which we'll talk about in the next two slides in our recommendation for differentiating with MROs.
So, as Matt mentioned, the third facet of our strategy is in regards to the MROs. So our objective here is to encourage our MRO providers to integrate Foresight into their already existing service networks. Now, we realize that the predictive maintenance emphasis of Foresight counters their route-based maintenance system and kind of throws their entire business plan out the window. So our strategy here is to create a pull marketing strategy instead that pulls demand from the end consumer that is using the actual product, and them demanding it from their MRO and say, hey, you need to integrate this as you service our product, and then them demanding it from us. So the result, that customer demands will be driven by the Foresight, the emphasis that Foresight puts on predictive maintenance for end consumers, and it will and will require MROs to adapt to that model. Now, we realize that your relationship with MROs is very important, and as Matt mentioned earlier, technological change is uncomfortable for a lot of companies. And forcing MROs to adapt to this new model through the market, or essentially going out of business because they can't compete with more efficient service.
So as we mentioned in the slide before last, there is the current push strategy that's in place in the market. And this push strategy, as we detailed, is just a lot of down the value delivery chain. But the thing about the value delivery chain with a push strategy is if values aren't aligned across each of the intermediaries in the value chain, the chain will quickly disintegrate. So certainly Nedic and Foresight kind of threatens the values of the MROs. So that chain is almost entirely disintegrated because they don't see the value in Foresight and they're uncomfortable with the change. The one push side recommendation that we can make is possible purchasing and buying incentives to buy equipment that's equipped with Foresight if you're an MRO. But what we really want to focus on is the pull marketing strategy. And what the pull marketing strategy is going to do is it's going to be Nedic marketing directly to the end customer, and then the end customer are going to be the ones that drive demand and pull that demand all the way back to Nedic. So end customers will demand Foresight, and then the MROs are going to service the end customers, and in conjunction with servicing the end customers, if the end customers are demanding Foresight, the MROs are going to then have to demand Foresight from Nedic, and so that's what creates that kind of pull in the market. Additionally, we believe through direct outreach to end consumers that it will also permeate other areas of the market. Companies that aren't even serviced by MROs will find out about Foresight through this direct marketing, and then they can go directly to us, to our existing service centers, and then we can have a direct value delivery network between us at Nedic and these customers as well. So it's bifaceted, and it improves our processes twofold.
So in addition to normal business-to-business communication, phone calls, emails, direct selling, we want Nedic to go to technology conferences like Manufacturing Technology Conference and Expo and the International Manufacturing Technology Show, and put up a big booth, a flashy booth if you want, and put Foresight at the forefront. Have examples of the dashboard and how it can improve machinery and what customers can actually see and what they can do with Foresight. Doing so will get customers get their hands on with the product before they actually have to buy it, and will allow them to get face-to-face contact with a Nedic representative. So that concludes the first recommendation as regards to positioning Foresight. Andrea is going to take it with data privacy and how doing the Internet of Things in the modern world with data privacy and cloud services is a challenge and how we can accompany it.
So again, the Internet of Things has become this huge thing all around. Like they're calling it like fourth revolution, and it's happening all over industries where it's helping bring process control and communication of each industry and of a business itself into one main platform. And it's basically what Foresight entails. It falls right into place with the Internet of Things, where people and industries want to have everything in one place, and they can just want to be able to access it wherever they can, wherever they want, and just be able to like communicate and act upon it. And so the Internet of Things really comes into play because the industry is just moving that way. It's forecast to reach 123 billion by 2021, according to the DIC, and it's just predicting that everything is just becoming interconnected. And this solution will just enhance value chains and will just make vertical value chains more valuable, where Foresight really will fall. But with all this benefits, obviously comes challenges and concerns. One of the main challenges that we have is security and data privacy. Again, there's a lot of cybersecurity currently that's happening, and we just really want to focus on that and making sure that we have the right equipment and right control to like make sure that all the data that our customers provide to us, or that they're aware of what we're doing with it, just really know where their data is. We don't want them to be unaware of who's using that data, who has access to that. We really want to make sure that they understand where their data is all through the process. And then again, that comes with regulatory compliance. All over the world, countries are implementing laws that regard data privacy and cybersecurity, and it's becoming a new thing. Even though some places like Europe already have regulations, there's like everywhere in the world is just becoming big. So we really have to focus on that because we don't want to go against any regulation, and we also want to be in front of the wave to make sure that we're not working in a country where a new law comes into play and that we have to change our entire business focus regarding data security. And there's also a lack of skills. There's not a lot of people, since it's a growing market, we need to make sure that we can provide that training so that the people that are using Foresight can really understand the system and its benefits to its max to really maximize what it can provide.
We think it is vital for NEDA to consider the different privacy and data protection laws in different countries that we operate in, especially ones where we have generated a lot of revenue. In China specifically, they have passed a very recent data protection law that impacts a lot of business structures. Like specifically, there's the consumer protection law, which China put in place to boost consumer confidence in businesses and as a way to streamline the change from China from an investment-driven economy to one of consumer-based economy, which is something we'll have to consider in the long run for revenue purposes. Additionally, they have different procedures for data transfers and for export. And the one issue with the security assessments is that there's they don't have a systematic way of how this procedure is supposed to go about or the conditions for it, and that just demonstrates that this law is still work in process, and it's something that we need to consider if we are pursuing business there. Next, in the U.S. is a different case where there's no federal data protection law, and it's more regulated as a private sector and by individualized states. But what we found is that in the states where NEDIC has operations, they have distributively the same or similar laws. So it is a good business opportunity as we have to consider the current laws. But we also don't have to make as much adjustments as needed in other countries. Next, in Japan, they also have made other adjustments to their data protection laws, and specifically they focus on personal information specifically. So they have behavioral analysis of information that could be transmitted as well as sensitive personal data. And the reason why this is important to consider in Japan specifically is because that is where NEDIC is from, and it's something that we're going to still be looking into the future, but we also have to consider that these laws are recent and will change over time. And finally, the EU has had the longest history of data protection from starting in 1995. But with the data-driven world, they have adjusted to these different changes, and it is important to consider that some of these regulations, with the increased territorial scope and also different areas as that do affect us. And additionally, there is a requirement for data protection officers and controllers to intermediately talk when they have data transfers. But the issue with this is that the member states do not have standardized regulations on notification, and this just shows that it is something that's going to be different from state to state within the European Union, and is not something that's going to be standardized across the entire.
So with this in mind, we looked at where the revenues come from for Ignite. And we looked at our geographic locations regarding our customer base and where our revenues come from, as well as looked at into what regulations exist in each of the continents where we mainly operate. And we found first that in Europe, our revenue percentage is 12.9% in 2016. And we found that this is important. Even though it's not our biggest market, it is an important market, but there's high regulations as mentioned before. And so we really have to consider this. Our second biggest market is Asia. 51% of our revenues come from that location. But again, it's a changing platform where right now there isn't really certainty regarding high regulations and where the data can be driven. So it's not as certain as we have in other countries, but it is our one of our biggest markets outside of Japan. And then we have the US, which is 19.6% of our market. And again, considering the other locations, it's lightly regulated because we understand the regulations, and we have already had more understanding regarding each state and where we operate. So with this, we are thinking on starting and launching this platform in the US because of the lightly regulations and since we really understand the market, then moving to Asia because it comes with such growing, because a huge part of our sales come from there, and then moving into Europe once we've really understood and standardized our system in order to benefit our customer base.
And that does come with the assumption that we're starting our operations in Japan just because that's our home country where we're familiar with, and it's going to be easiest to run a test market in the short run. So finally, we just had a couple of alternatives that we wanted to bring up and talk about why we feel our recommendation trumped a few of those. So the first alternative, it related to decreasing focus on the end consumer with the whole marketing strategy that we talked about with the MROs and catering more to MROs. So having more incentives to MROs, marketing directly to MROs, communicating value to MROs. And while we feel like this was important, we also feel like there's a fundamental disconnect between the values of NEDIC and the MROs on the value delivery network with the institution of Foresight, and we figured that a demand-driven pull strategy would be most efficient in accomplishing these means. Second, we could have completely disintermediated the MROs and gone with a direct service model, which we figured in the short run was completely unfeasible, because if we disintermediate MROs and OEMs in the service they provide, then we're losing many customer relationships and a very, very high amount of revenue, and saying we're gonna build infrastructure in a very short time, we're gonna reestablish all these customer relationships that MROs and OEMs already have for us and provide direct service. That was just not feasible and wouldn't work. So with that, it concludes our presentation. We thank you guys for listening. And now we open up to questions. If anyone has.
I guess I'll start with a question. So first of all, I like the fact that you guys were able to segment out the different models. You know, with the NEDIC service model, you had the OEMs that you took into consideration, and then also the MROs. And I like the idea behind the pull strategy, where it's going to be a consumer-driven demand versus, you know, us forcing the MROs into utilizing the technology. I'm wondering though, would pursuing the MRO strategy cannibalize the OEMs? I feel like we're going behind the backs of the OEMs.
Right. So I guess as we went with both the strategies, for the OEMs, we figured it'd be the easiest sell, rather than going around them because they're much larger companies a lot of times. We figured going around their back would be inefficient, and because they are so large, they already have these very large and diverse customer bases that we can utilize. For the MROs, we thought that we did consider that it might feel like we're going behind their backs, but we also thought that because they're oftentimes very much smaller than an OEM, they might just be a few people who go and do these service checks, or maybe 100 people at max in a company oftentimes going and doing these service checks, that since they are smaller, the market is much more disintegrated, and we can drive change just from the consumer side and then influence the market, and then you'll have many, many MROs who will then adapt to this, rather than a couple key relationships that might get mad and leave. One or two MROs leaving us will not be fundamental to our business, whereas for the OEMs, we figured it would, so that's why we kind of differentiated the strategies in that way.
In my experience, most OEMs lock their customers into long-term maintenance deals because it's an important revenue stream for them. But, I mean, so how do you're going to pursue the maintenance organization structure? How do you get around the fact that most OEMs already have the customer base locked into maintenance?
Right, absolutely. So I think, go ahead, Ivan.
So we weren't looking to replace the OEMs as a service provider. We were looking to show the OEMs how we can improve their service. If they can spend less time going and doing these checks on a regular basis and can do it when they need to on a predictive basis, then their customers will see lower costs. Their customers will want to buy more product from them and get locked into those long-term service contracts because they see a more efficient method for servicing their machines.
And as it relates to kind of the direct strategy, we wouldn't want to compete directly with the customers that OEMs already have, because oftentimes those customers are going to the OEMs because the OEMs have a comprehensive product that they really enjoy. We'd probably be going to the customers who have bought their products from maybe other OEMs or other sources and don't really necessarily have those relationships and might need someone to service them. So we'd be targeting directly the market that doesn't have these service relationships and contracts, but it definitely wouldn't be the most paramount part of our strategy, just because the market may already be saturated.
Okay. Now, you don't have a direct relationship with the end user. And again, in my experience, when you start taking power and visibility away from that end user, they're going to get pissed. They're not going to like losing control over their destiny.
Mm-hmm.
How do you didn't address that issue in the presentation? How do you get around the problem? You're going to get resistance from the end user, even though you don't have a direct relationship with them.
Right.
The OEM is going to have pushback, some serious pushback.
Right.
Is it, can I just quit, is it resistance from the end user to implement forecasts, or is it resistance?
Well, they're losing, if I understand the proposition, they're losing some visibility of the data, and they're certainly losing control over what they do with that. You know, they're giving up some portion of their destiny that's tied to this equipment to the OEM and ultimately to us.
Mm-hmm. We think definitely that there's a trade-off existent, and we think that if OEMs and end users enter into that contract with the trade-off in mind, that we can communicate the value of foresight to each of them. So to the end user, the value in that is that their service speed will be increased and their accuracy will be increased because the OEMs can see that. And for the OEMs, they can increase customer delight, which is definitely one of their key components because they can more quickly and accurately service end users' products. So certainly there will be some sacrifices that need to be made, but we feel like the benefits that foresight offers are going to outweigh those sacrifices and mitigate the risk.
And
Yeah.
going on with like the international internet things, I think that we are not looking at a market anymore where we're going into like just checking on machines on a like regular basis, that it's just going to be more automated. And I think that we're just riding the trend of everything's going to be like cloud-based, and in the short run or long term, like we should focus on that, since like even though there might be resistance now, if we don't go into the automation and like connection of things, at the end of the day, there's going to be another platform that's going to be able to do that. And so we really think that focusing on the long-term effect of this will be more beneficial.
I should point out, I thought one thing you did very well was introduce the next topic. You know, you kind of give a little overview so the listener has some clarity of where you're going and kind of see the roadmap of the presentation. But it's a good idea.
Thank you.
One thing I had, I know you had an emphasis on marketing this towards the end user. Us as NEDEC, we really don't oftentimes have access to the end user. I work on large projects right now, and it's very rare that I'm ever in contact with the physical end user. There's many chains in between us and them. So I think while it's interesting in theory, I'm not sure if it's exactly the most realistic way to do it. In your guys' eyes, would you focus more on the OEM or the MROs in terms of our key target customer for the Foresight product exclusively?
Yeah, so I think our focus would probably chiefly be the OEMs because it's much easier to go to one OEM who has relationships with 1,000 end users rather than maybe one MRO who has relationships with 3 end users. And as you mentioned with the direct marketing strategy, certainly anytime you undertake direct marketing is going to be costly. Certainly like going to conferences, things like that will build awareness, but a full rollout of a direct marketing strategy is certainly costly and there's certainly risks involved. So while we think it is a very important facet, we believe that OEMs would probably be chief to that just because the relationships which they have, it's much easier to make sure that you have a solid relationship with them because they impact 1,000 people rather than an MRO who impacts 3 people, or rather than a direct marketing strategy where you're gonna have to do a grassroots effort one by one. So while we feel that both are important and we feel like a direct marketing strategy may be a risk that needs to be taken in the short run for long run gains, we do believe that OEMs are our chief concern.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of going on to that, would you allow access in the US where there's not really any rules or regulations at this point, would you allow the end user to have access to that data, or would that be OEM exclusive? Would they be responsible for that?
I think the end user would always have access to their own data. I think NEDEC would own it and they would store the data, but the end user would always have access and could control who else had access. So if the end user wanted to give an MRO access, they could say, hey, we want to give, this is our MRO, we want to give them access. Or this is our OEM, we want to give them access. I think they always have control of their own data, so they feel they're in control and they can look at on their own and say, hey, this looks funny, do you want to come check this out? Or something like that.
Yeah, it's just an interesting topic in our industry because it's, as I've kind of mentioned to you guys, it's one of those things that we've never had this kind of access to data of our product in their application, and I'm not necessarily sure that even our direct OEM customers want us to have that access. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting time where all this is coming together, and how is it going to play out, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, certainly there definitely have to be those discussions too with OEMs and the service providers where we provide access. And I think we kind of likened it to maybe like a Google model where you have access to the data, But then we don't want NEDIC to necessarily be actively harnessing the data, obviously not selling the data, acting ethically with the data. But so they own the data and they host it on the cloud, and then customers are the ones who can really access the data and see what's going on. And then from there were laws with the Internet of Things that basically said you have to expressly authorize access and anyone who can access it. So that would be all up to the end user, just because we feel like obviously that's important. And if we fudge any ethical lines and don't have that kind of expectation going in, it's definitely gonna hurt us.
And another idea we tossed around was with access to that data as an edict, you see what parts of your machines are failing fastest, and you can use that as a R&D to improve your machines later on. And I think the benefits go beyond just service. You can use it to actually improve your manufacturing or improve your designs.
That is exactly why we want access to that data, so that we can learn about where we need to improve.
And I think communicating that, like, there's some validity in that, like, understanding to the client, like, we're not trying to, like, sell your data, we're just trying to, like, enhance even, like, your performance. Like, by understanding our machines better in the field, we'll just, like, be able to, like, really make our machines better at the end. So.
And there's certainly going to be a lot that's probably going to go into that as you guys embark on this, just because like the wording and the way that you describe things is so finicky, and like one wrong term or one wrong like core value will completely throw things off. So it's definitely going to be something that has to be built out for sure. That we probably couldn't do it in 10 hours, but we appreciate the opportunity.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.